Hello, and welcome to Introducing Me. I'm your host, Sarah. I started this podcast to get to know other people and lifestyles while discovering more about myself. Each episode, I will give a new guest a chance to discuss their background, culture, interests, or whatever they want to talk about to help increase all of our own worldviews. Today, I would like to introduce you to Luaskya Nonon. She is a first-generation American with an Afro-Latina heritage. She is a licensed attorney with 20 years of experience and is the founder and CEO of Equity Principal Consulting. I'm excited to have Luaskya here today to share more about her story, her life experiences. So thank you so much, Luaskya. Why don't you go ahead and tell the audience more about yourself?
Thank you so much, Sarah, for this opportunity. I sincerely appreciate you sharing your platform with me. So, as you said, yes, I am a first generation American. I am of Afro-Latina descent. My parents immigrated from Panama in Central America, and they raised my sister and I in Brooklyn, New York. So I'm a proud native of New York City. Growing up in New York, particularly going to elementary school and even in high school, I've always been in diverse communities. And that didn't change until I actually entered into my graduate degree, or rather college, when I went to NYU for college. And for those of you that don't know, NYU is a predominantly white institution. And it was a stark difference from my upbringing in elementary school and even in high school, particularly because of the lack of diversity. And when I say diversity, I mean diversity of ethnicities, of identities, the gamut. That was my experience growing up in Brooklyn, not so much attending NYU. Thankfully, the city and the surrounding communities around NYU's campus, I was able to interact with folks of different identities. But in actually attending the university, that was not the case. It was, as stated, a predominantly white institution. And so I had to learn really quickly how to navigate operating in what I call white spaces. And shortly after undergrad degree, I decided to attend law school. And I found myself in a similar situation again, where I am attending a space that is predominantly white and not my norm in terms of even just interacting with people. I decided to go to a law school in North Carolina and UNC School of Law. And although I was able to find communities there as well that was familiar to me and that was of diverse identities, the school itself was predominantly a white university. And that presented challenges as well. But these challenges that I'm speaking about all taught me how to navigate these predominantly white spaces or dominant culture communities. And so as I attended the law school and then graduated, when I look back on that, I realized that it was a learning curve. It was a significant learning curve coming from New York to North Carolina. There was very clear racial differences in North Carolina at that time when I entered here. And don't get me wrong, there was that prevalent in New York as well, but it wasn't as much of a stark contrast as it was in North Carolina when I entered law school. And so that's been a running theme that I've realized throughout my life, that I've had to learn how to navigate these predominantly white spaces. And in my career as an attorney, I had entered law school thinking that I was going to go and do social impact related work, but I was an out of state student and life happened. And so because I realized that my law school loans were going to be a dependent that I would likely die with because it was so significant. And as I mentioned, life happened. So I decided not to go the route of the social impact work, but to just find a job that will enable me to pay off my law school loans and ultimately have a family and live a good, decent life. And so I decided to try to obtain a position as an in-house attorney, and I was fortunate to do that. But one of the things that I think about often is the fact that even in my professional career, statistically speaking, there are 5% of lawyers in the United States are Black people. And only 6% of warriors in the United States are Hispanic. And so, again, I find myself in communities, in professional spaces, statistically even, that are causing me to navigate through these white spaces. They're predominantly white spaces that I'm entering into. And so one of the things that I realized several years ago was that I became very adept at doing that. And so I've worked with law students and law students of color, people of color, to help them do that as well. Junior attorneys that I'm interacting with, I try to mentor them and help them navigate those spaces because it can be very challenging, particularly if you're a first generation student. It's not easy figuring out how to maneuver in these spaces, especially if you have a desire to achieve a level of success, whatever that may be. And so a few years ago, I decided to create my consultancy, which happens to be a consultancy that focuses on providing support to corporate leaders to identify, eradicate, and mitigate their disparities and inequities that they have in their systems, policies, programs, and practices so that they can create better workplace cultures. And as part of that work, I also help facilitate workshops and provide coaching services. My preference is to work with high performing leaders and even some first generation employees who need the help to navigate the corporate spaces so that they can ultimately identify their best path to success within those spaces. And I've been very pleased with that work. I find that although I am still a practicing attorney and I still enjoy my work in support of information technology companies as an in-house attorney, I find that I am most passionate about the work that I'm doing in my consultancy because I'm able to realize greater impact. Going back to my plan of having a social impact work life that I wanted when I initially pursued law school, I find that doing this work through my consultancy enables me to have a positive impact on society and ultimately by in one way helping corporate spaces, corporate leaders of dominant culture create corporate spaces that support and create inclusivity for diverse identities. And on the other side, helping those folks of diverse identities to gain the support that they need in order to navigate those spaces. So I try to come at that perspective of creating better, healthier, inclusive workspaces from both perspectives, one on the dominant culture side with the corporate leaders, and then on the side of the employees that are of diverse identities or first generation identities to help them just have the skills that they need to navigate these spaces. And so that's the work that I'm doing now. And I am blessed and fortunate to be able to do this work. I am very thankful to be able to do this work, but I also know that it is part of the purpose that I'm here on earth to help both these groups to just create spaces where ultimately they can thrive and have profitable companies.
Awesome. So a lot of your experience, and just what's happened in life for you has included navigating these spaces. Now you're helping other people navigate these sort of spaces. Being a first generation American, did your parents, like, were they able to help you navigate or kind of say, like, hey, once you leave Brooklyn, like, life is going to be a little bit different?
Yeah, so it was interesting. It's my parents had two children, myself and my sister, and my parents believed wholeheartedly in attending college, and so they bought into the idea that you needed to attend college and get a good job and have a good life and all that, and then it's like the American dream, and that's not the case for everyone. That wasn't necessarily the case for them even, right? My parents, when they emigrated here from Panama, they were teenagers and they worked really hard and they were not able to um, attend college or university. But they definitely wanted that for their children, as most parents do, right? Most parents want their children to go farther than they did. And so I am thankful that my parents have been able to see me and my sister go further than they did. As for navigating white spaces, my parents, they made both of us very aware of who we are as Afro-Latinas, right? And as well as recognizing that when we're outside in the world, people see us as Black women. It's my sister and I, so people see us as Black people. They're unaware of our ethnicity, of a Latina culture. And so irrespective of that, they are going to treat us like a Black person, however they perceive Black people to be. And that unfortunately meant that there were certain stereotypes and biases that some people have about Black people. And so my parents instilled in us a desire for us to always operate from a space of excellence, right? To be our best selves and not to buy into the beliefs of others. And so there's a level of confidence that I have that I know was instilled in me from my parents, and just me being comfortable in who I am as an individual. My faith as a Christian has also helped me, but again, that has also been part of my familial upbringing, and it has really helped me it has helped me to navigate these spaces. I appreciate the question because I didn't initially, when you asked it, I was thinking, well, did my parents help me in that way? But they didn't help me navigate the spaces, but they helped me by equipping me with the tools to be able to navigate the spaces.
And you mentioned a little bit how your parents, did make sure you understood your culture, the reality of what others might think might not be accurate to, your entire identity. So what sort of things do you still kind of bring into your life from their culture, your culture, that, might be different than, say, predominantly white culture or, people you're surrounded by?
I don't necessarily believe that it's different than predominantly white culture or dominant culture. I think that what's important to us and what's been instilled in me as an Afro-Latina has been just the importance of family and faith, and just keeping God at the center of our lives has been very important to us growing up, and just recognizing the values that we have as Christian individuals, as people that have a family and are always representing our family when we are operating outside of our homes. And so those are things I think that are likely common principles that many families carry. And I think that that is something that I know that that is something that has been very important to my parents and that they've instilled in us. And I carry that through with my family as well.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, it's not, I wouldn't say it's uncommon for, familial importance to,
Mm-hmm.
rise to the top when we think about what has been instilled in us. So I like you acknowledging the fact that, it's not just because you're an Afro-Latina, a lot of people can experience that.
Absolutely. I mean, the music, the culture in terms of how we say certain things, foods that we eat, all of that, of course, is typical to the culture. But even there's such nuances because we have multiple families from different countries within our collective family, and so it's the melting pot of just different aspects of our identities that make us who we are, and all of that is good stuff and all of that is goodness. And I do think though that that has enabled us to appreciate people and their diverse identities, perhaps different than other communities, because they don't have the experience of interacting with folks and understanding folks, and really valuing the individual for who they are and what they bring to this space. And I think that it's possible that certain communities, particularly certain individuals in dominant communities, have not had those experiences. Therefore, they don't value that difference that some people bring to the table. And that is limiting in many ways.
Right, of course. Now, did your parents immigrate just themselves, or do you have family scattered throughout the world that you've been able to visit?
So they came with their siblings. My mom came with her sister and my grandmother, and my dad came with his older siblings because he's the baby of the family. And so I have cousins and aunts throughout the U.S. I've been able to communicate with, and initially most of them were in Brooklyn, or most of them were in the state of New York, let's say, and so was able to meet with my family, vacation, or visit with them during my vacations, my summer vacations and summer breaks. And so that was always good too, because it was important for my parents, for us to know our family, to know our roots, to know where we come from, to recognize the value of who we are as a people. Again, because my parents are very aware that certain folks of the dominant culture have certain perceptions, biases, stereotypes about us, and us as a people collective, not just us as individuals specifically. And so when we enter certain spaces, my parents wanted to equip us, armor us with shields that enable us to just not fall prey to the beliefs of others.
And have you ever had moments where you have, kind of maybe soaked in those beliefs more that it's been harder to push them away?
I am very blessed and fortunate. So I don't believe that I've allowed beliefs, statements that I have received from others to penetrate and permeate through my skin. Yes, I've heard them. Yes, I have witnessed bias and stereotypes and microaggressions. Yes, I have been on the receiving end of all of that. Yes, I have been upset, sad, angry, emotional about it, but I've not allowed it to permeate through my skin and penetrate through my soul, only because I know who I am and I know my value. Um, and I know that that is all because of my parents, and I am so very grateful for that.
Yeah, it sounds like your parents did a great job
They did.
instilling good values.
They did. I'm very thankful for that because I know that there are so many people, which is another reason why I love the work that I do. I know that there are many people of color in corporate workspaces that are not able to fight off or withstand the stressors, the microaggressions, the biases, the stereotypes, and they shouldn't have to. Don't get me wrong. I'm not happy that this work is needed, right? It would be great if the work that I do was not needed in the world that we live in, but that's not the world we live in. And I believe that I have the skills and capabilities to really help in this space. And so this is why I do what I do. So, um, yeah, I do know that there are people I meet often. I meet people and I can see them begin to like shrink a bit, where they are no longer their just self, their beautiful, courageous self. They begin to change, and it can significantly impact an individual's soul if they're continuously in these spaces where they are belittled or overlooked, and then they begin to question themselves. That's why the imposter syndrome is a very popular philosophy right now. Um, I struggle with that concept a little bit, but that's just me.
Right. Yeah. So, how did you first kind of transition into the world of consulting since you weren't necessarily in the social impact space as a lawyer as you may have once dreamed of?
Mm.
How did you kind of start that part of your career?
It's interesting. I knew that the work that I wanted to do was important, and I realized when I started my consultancy, and people have asked me this question before, I look back on my career and realized that I had been doing this work before in the capacity of an attorney. As an example, when I think of the evolution of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, it of course, it started within the Jim Crow laws and also affirmative action programs. But I supported the implementation of affirmative action programs in my role as an employment lawyer in companies. And so I've been doing that. I've been providing support in establishing internship programs to diversify recruiting, the talent pools, and things like that. So this work, I would say I have been doing for quite some time, even when I look back at the mentorship opportunities that I've been doing and the trainings that I've been doing. So the consultancy for me just seemed like the next gradual step, right, in the evolution of me, right, of where I wanted to go and where I wanted to ultimately end up. And as I mentioned before, I believe that the consultancy is an opportunity to have greater impact. And so I'm still in the corporate space. I'm still an in-house attorney for a tech company. And I knew that I needed to start my consultancy at an opportunity when I was still working that corporate job so that I could at least try to manage both of them to really build up my clientele to then be able to transition full-time into my consultancy.
So is that the long-term goal, to do consultancy full-time, or do you think there's something else alongside that?
So the long-term goal is to do consultancy, but as I think about that, there are several pillars within my consultancy. I have the consultancy where I am consulting on, let's say, helping corporations create a DEI strategic plan or create equity audits to address the inequities and disparities in their systems, policies, programs, and practices, or doing some modifications to their ERG charters. So that's the consultancy. Or as another alternative, serving in the capacity of a fractional chief diversity officer for those organizations that are in transition to hiring their next. But then there's also the coaching aspect of it, where I'm actually providing support to these organizations to help coach their high performers or their first generation employees. And then lastly, there's the speaking side of my business, where I conduct speaking engagements or facilitate workshops. So all of that is under the umbrella of the consultancy. So the long-term plan is absolutely to do all of that under the umbrella of my company, which is called Equity Principal Consulting.
And so in your experience, kind of pre-consulting, being an in-house lawyer, whether it's current company, previous positions, what has your experience been like in the world of DEI? Like, are they doing good things, or have you been in those situations where you're now like helping others where like this business could use some help?
Yeah. So actually, when I started working on doing this work, I actually, one of my employees was like my test case, right? I helped create their DEI strategic plan. And it's so good to see the changes in real time. It's so good to see the different identities walking the halls and the space being a space where folks feel better to come every day, right? That level of impact was just confirmation for me that not only that this work is impactful, that this work is needed, but that this work is work that I can actually see the results of. So it has been great. But I have been in workspaces where it's not been that great. And I knew that things needed to change, but I also recognized that those spaces that I've been in where it was not great, the leadership wasn't ready to make changes. And this is before you even refer to it as DEI. I mean, we're just talking about creating a healthy, habitable workspace for employees to come every day. Like, I've been in those spaces where it hadn't been that great, and people were really not, they were unwell because they were in workspaces that were not enabling them to be healthy. And that is driven from, like everything else, from the top down. And if the leadership is not going to identify their bad actors and address their behavior and how they're treating their people, then ultimately it's not a place for most folks to work. And I have counseled folks to, and me included, like that. That's one of the reasons why I've left some of the spaces that I've left, because it's just not a healthy space. And sometimes the work that I do is not able to be appreciated and realized in real time by the corporations because of the leadership that they have. And so I recognize full well that I am not the individual to bring this work to fruition to all employers. I know that I am not for everyone, right? And I'm okay with that. I also acknowledge that the message that I have to help create better workplaces is a message that may be better heard by someone that doesn't look like me. And I'm okay with that too. But I am an individual that has a very abundant mindset. And so I truly believe that my clients, the clients that can hear what I have to say and not have their feelings hurt, if they can hear what I have to say and recognize that I want the best for them and for their people, and they see that as me being a trusted advisor, those are the clients that I want. And those are the clients that will continue to seek me out. And so I've been blessed to have those clients come in and work with me.
And so then, of course, every client is different.
Mm-hmm.
They're all coming, to you at different spaces in their journeys.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say is one of the more popular ways to see actionable change? Like what will bring a company the most success to have a healthier, more inclusive culture?
I think so. I'm going to answer that in two ways. I think what most companies think is the answer to that question is they think that starting with the D in DEI, so focusing on the diverse representation, is the way to have the greatest impact on their DEI journey. And they're wrong. And that's the biggest mistake. And I say that because it's fairly, maybe easy is not the right way, but it's not as challenging. I'm going to use the word easy for the sake of the conversation. It's easier maybe to identify diverse candidates, to get them into the candidate pool, and even to hire them. And it's easy to bring them into your workspace, to onboard them. It's harder to create the culture that folks of diverse identities can come to work every day and really appreciate that they're in a space where they can feel like they belong, that they're in a space that appreciates them, that values them, that's going to equip them with what they need to thrive, with the acknowledgement that if your employees thrive, and ultimately you as an organization thrives. That inclusivity work is harder. But that is where the gold is. That is where you need to start. And for me, when I work with clients, I lead with equity. I lead with equity because I also recognize that the playing field is not leveled for all employees. Meritocracy is BS, right? That's BS. And when you acknowledge that and you recognize that there's some systemic inequities in your systems and your policies, programs, and practices, if you can just eradicate those, identify them and eradicate those, you can create an environment where every person you bring into the office, into the workspace, is at a point in their career where they are going to be given whatever they need in order to thrive. Then you're creating an opportunity for everyone to win. It's a win-win for everyone. And so inclusivity is about creating the spaces that they can thrive, and equity is about eradicating and removing those inequities to enable folks to have that level playing field. So I operate in the E and I space a lot more than the D space, because I think the D is the easiest. That's the low-hanging fruit. And so to your point, many leaders are looking for the low-hanging fruit. Like, what are the low-hanging fruits? What are the quick and easy things that I can do to check the box and say I did it and did it well? And some of those are in the I, some of those are in the inclusivity. So some of that may be, let's change the bathrooms and make sure that the bathrooms are gender neutral bathrooms. So if I have someone that's of a transgender identity, that they will feel okay about entering any bathroom because they're all gender neutral bathrooms. Or they may have birthing rooms for moms that are nursing. Right? Those are some easy things to do, and I am all for those. Right? I'm all for the low hanging fruits because they're important to have everyone feel good. Everyone needs to feel good, but you need to recognize that that's just very surface. And this work is deeper. This work requires intentionality and strategy, and it's really not about the low hanging fruit.
So, what would you say some of those deeper impact things are in making a place more inclusive that might not be that surface level that somebody might easily think of? Like, oh, like, let's just first even just change these two single room bathrooms. Like, what are some of those deeper things?
Looking at your policies. So, when I speak with HR leaders, often they haven't looked at their policy statements for a long time. And that's no fault of their own. HR departments manage a lot, and there's so many moving parts, and they've got to deal with all of the employee relations matters. So there's a lot for them to deal with. It would be amazing if there were opportunities for organizations to have like a policy department that is going to constantly look at their policies and procedures to identify ways in which to improve those. As an example, if you look at parental leave policies, how broad are or not are those policies? Do those policies really offer opportunities for the female worker who has a female partner that's adopting a child? So technically neither of them are a birth parent, but they still should be able to get the longer maternal leave availability, because even though they're not birthing the child, they still are going to need to bond with that child. So is your language broad enough to cover all of the identities represented in your organization? So when we talk deeper, I look at policies and I ask that question to my client. So when you pull up a policy, read the policy, and then let's ask yourself, who's missing? Now, who's not covered? Like, what identities that could possibly be represented in my employee population are not covered by this policy? Oh, well, then I need to fix that. That's the deeper kind of work, but it takes time, it takes intentionality, because you've got to think about it, right? You've got to pull out the policy, you've got to read the policy, and then you've got to open your mind to the possibility that there may be folks that are not captured, are not adequately protected, or afforded the benefits that this policy intends to extend to them. So what can we do about that? How can we level the playing field? How can we remove those inequities?
And when you're having those kind of conversations with, your clients and your consulting, are those conversations sometimes really hard, or like easy probably isn't the word either, but like what is the vibe or the feelings around having those conversations?
It's nervous. It's a level of nervousness. It's a level of perhaps maybe even fear. I get that a lot when we talk about the numbers, when we talk about representation, and what are the numbers of your diverse employee population. And don't stop at POC. I don't want people of color all lumped up together. I want it broken down by ethnicities and as deep as you can go. So when it talks about those numbers or about the policy changes, it's a level of nervousness. It's a level of fear. I think that perhaps leaders think that it's their fault that the numbers aren't where they should be, or that the policy isn't broad enough. And I try to communicate to them that I'm not here to place blame. I mean, I want to be a trusted advisor. You have brought me in to do this work. You want to do the work necessary to create this environment where all of your people and all of the identities that they bring to the workspace can feel that they're comfortable, that they're accepted, that they're seen, that they belong. So we're not here for that. We're here to just identify what is, because it is. The numbers are just the numbers, right? The policies are just the policies. But that's just the way they are today. Our goal is to make them better. So let's work toward making them better. And so I try to help them I try to move them away from that state of fear, that state of maybe it's shame, guilt. I don't know exactly what the individual space that they may be in, but there's apprehension about those things. And I try to let them know I'm not here for that. My goal is to help improve the situation. And in order to do that, we have to acknowledge what is. I'm not here to make you feel better about what is. It is what it is, right? Our goal is to make it better. And so let's not stay stuck in a space where anyone should feel shame or guilt or that it's a punitive matter. No, it's punitive. It should be if you're going to stay here. Like if we're going to keep things as status quo, then yeah, I'm going to call you out on that, and I'm gonna leave you there if that's where you want to be. But if you've asked to have me do this work for you, and you're paying me to do this work, I'm going to do my job.
Well, of course, that's definitely the right attitude to take there. I believe you mentioned that you also will consult kind of like one-on-one with people. So what sort of advice are you giving them if they're in a culture, that isn't appreciative of their identity,
Yeah.
or they do feel singled out, like they're the only one who's like them? What sort of advice are you giving them?
So when I do my coaching, I try to stay away from advising. So as a coach and in the training that I have received, my objective is to hold space for my clients to ask very curious, pointed questions to help them realize within themselves whatever answer it is that they seek. And so if an employee, or rather, if a client is coming to me because they feel that they're in an unhealthy, negative, or toxic workspace, I'm asking them, what is your objective with the conversation? Like, how do you want me to help you? And if they're asking for clarity on how to navigate this space, then we're going to talk about, well, what have you done? How has this made you feel? Is this a feeling you've had before? How is it that you've operated in this space before? Was that successful? If that was not successful, what do you think you can do differently? What is your ultimate goal on how you want to feel? And so we're talking about those things so that the individual can really uncover for themselves what they want to achieve, and then we work on a plan for them to achieve that ultimate goal. Because I firmly believe that we all have the answer that we need within us. We just are living such very busy lives, all of us, and we don't have the opportunity to really just block out the world, to be quiet within ourselves enough to just figure ish out. And I do think that some of the challenges are that we may not even know the questions to ask ourselves to really get to that point. And so I believe a good coach can help you by asking those questions to help you answer within yourself so that you can get the clarity that you need in order to achieve whatever you want to achieve.
Great. And have you kind of done those sort of own exercises with yourself to figure out, where you've needed to be?
Yes. So I am a strong proponent of coaching because I have had amazing coaches. I have not always had clarity about what I wanted to do or what I wanted to pursue in life. There have been times in my life where I knew what I was doing wasn't fulfilling enough. What I was doing left me feeling like I was wanting something more, that I could be doing something more. That there were different feelings that I have been experiencing over the course of my life where I knew that I needed help to unpack it. I knew that I needed help to figure out the direction that I needed to go. And coaching has truly helped me with multiple different coaches at different stages of my life to figure stuff out.
Of course, yes. Now, I'm not sure I have any other specific questions for you, but of course, you might have more you want to share. So, is there anything else that you want to make sure the listeners hear today?
Um, I would, my last thoughts, I guess, would be just definitely recommending the the value of coaching. I think coaching is a critical component of any individual's life, and to the extent that someone can find a coach, I think that it's important. I do have coaching services as well, so that's something that we could talk about. You can give them my contact information after. But on the consultancy side, I do think that it's important for C-suite, HR executives, corporate leaders to really understand that despite that there's so much anti-DEI rhetoric going on in the world, I do believe that this work is necessary. Whether it's called DEI or something else, I do think that the fundamental principles of creating equitable and inclusive workspaces where people can really thrive is going to continue to be a necessary component of any successful organization. And yes, there are many ways to get there, but I do think that corporate leaders should not shy away from doing the work to create those spaces, because I do believe that employees are demanding it, and they will continue to demand it. And if they are not getting that being the inclusive, equitable workplaces where they feel that their wellness is prioritized, they will either stay where they are and be very miserable and not productive, or they'll leave. Either way, it's not beneficial for the organization. So I would strongly encourage corporate leaders to stay the course, to engage with consultants like me in particular, that's wanting to help them create these truly inclusive and equitable workplace cultures.
Yes. Employee culture, seeing where people are at is so important as mental health continues to be a conversation that is being brought to the surface. I think everything you said there, is very important to hear. Now, at the end of all my episodes, I do ask my guests a random question. So my question for you today, we'll see if you have an answer, is what skill would you like to master?
It's funny you should ask that question just today. So I mentioned at the start that I'm a first generation American of Afro-Latina descent, and I took Spanish in high school and college, and I was proficient enough. I even minored in Spanish, but I don't excel at it. And I just today was thinking I really need to find a Spanish immersion program, because I really want to be fluent in Spanish. And I say that in particular because sometimes when I share in certain communities that I am Afro-Latina, and they see that my skin is black, but they also then find out I'm not fluent in Spanish, I get a little bit of a side eye, like, oh, you're really Afro-Latino? Like, really? I'm like, yes, really. And I'm sure I'm not the only first generation American of Afro-Latina descent that experiences that, but it's a bit of an annoyance. And no, it hasn't permeated my skin, but it annoys me, and it's my own fault. So I want to become fluent in Spanish. So I am planning on I've seen a couple, so I'm going to find a Spanish immersion program, because I really think that I just need to just throw myself all in it and just master the language. So who knows? The next time we speak, maybe I'll be speaking to you in Spanish.
All right, that brings this episode to a close. So, of course, if you would like to connect with Luaskya, her LinkedIn will be in the description. That's the best way to connect with her. And her website for Equity Principal Consulting will also be in the website as well, if you'd like to check out more of her services there. And of course, if you would like to connect with the podcast, our website is in the description. It brings you to all of our social media. We are on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook if you'd like to go follow those pages. It also brings you to all of our past episodes, past resources, social media, so feel free to go check all of those things out, listen to some other episodes. And of course, if you would like to support the podcast monetarily, there is a link to do that as well. And if you would like to be a guest to share your story, my email is in the description. That is always the best way to connect with me. So thank you so much, Luaskya, for spending time with me today, and to my listeners for taking the time out of your day to hear a new story. Until next time, bye.
Bye. Thank you so much, Sarah. Have a great day.